Thank you very much.
I'll try. I did 257 up in the General Assembly Hall, so I hope I can do it here again. Thank you so much. Your Highness, heads of state and of government, your excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of our planet. We are indeed facing an emergency situation, an absolute emergency, because as in medical emergencies, this could be a matter of survival. We can see this very clearly in the Mediterranean region, where year after year we are becoming increasingly aware of the gravity of the situation. The situation is very largely the result of climate change, of global warming, which is disrupting the Earth's ecosystems and is endangering numerous species. But it is even more largely the result of unreasonable human activities. The shores of the Mediterranean Sea, which represents barely 1% of the world's oceans, attract 30% of international tourism, 25% of the international shipping trade, and 30% of maritime oil transports. On a daily basis, its fragile ecosystems are being destroyed by pollution and urban development. This is the reason why there is an urgent need to act for the Mediterranean Sea. It is absolutely crucial to save it from the 600,000 tons of plastics that are dumped into it every year, and whose effects are particularly devastating on ecosystems, on certain emblematic species, such as turtles, but more broadly speaking, on the entire food chain, and therefore our own very health. This is why, with my foundation, we are carrying out a large number of projects to combat this scourge. Through the BMED program, which we set up in 2015, we are supporting and developing around 40 local initiatives all around the Mediterranean basin that allow us to develop innovative solutions and involve populations affected by these issues. Broadly speaking, to save the Mediterranean, we need to limit and to control human activities, in particular those that are depleting its ecosystems. This is why we are supporting MPAs, marine protected areas, in the Mediterranean, and notably through the innovative environmental trust fund called the Med Fund, created along with France and Tunisia, and other countries joined in since then. The aim of this fund is to mobilize private and public funds, and to promote the development of a network of Mediterranean MPAs. These MPAs will allow us to strike a balance between certain human activities and the urgent need to protect our natural heritage, threatened ecosystems, and endangered species. I'm thinking in particular of another species, the Mediterranean monk seal, which was once abundant and was one of the world's, and is now one of the world's most endangered marine mammals. And we are working with a network of experts to try to change this very situation. This is also why there is a need to better marine transportation and ban the use of heavy fuel that is particularly harmful in regards to air pollution, to sea pollution, and to greenhouse gas emissions. Because what we must do to save our planet, its climate, and its biodiversity today, in this emergency situation, is to establish a new development model. We've heard this over and over again. This is a daunting and enormous task, and everyone needs to get involved at every level. It needs a general increase in awareness, and it needs a clearly defined and shared set of principles. That is what brings us here together. That's why I hope that it will be included in the emergency declaration that we are calling for, not only for nature, but for all of us and for all generations. Thank you very much.
You did beautifully well. Thank you for sticking to time. Absolutely. I apologize for putting you all under such great pressure. So it seems that we have one champion for an emergency declaration. May I ask Your Excellency to come up and see if you are also our new champion for the emergency declaration?
Thank you. Excellencies, honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen, in the context of climate crisis, the Secretary General Antonio Guterres was right when we said we need action. Why do we need action? Because in a nutshell, you could say that nature is already striking back. This summer, the Amazon was burning, or still is. And we sit in our armchairs before the television looking aghast. In Austria, that's the country I come from, in Austria there are certain woods that are not on fire, they're not burning, but they are slowly dying. Those are fir trees, and Austria consists mainly of fir trees. Fir trees all over, thousands of hectares are already dead, and the woods have to be cleared. And I don't think this particular kind of fir tree, the spruce, will survive below, say, 1,000 meters above sea level. Finally, a third example, Siberian permafrost is thawing, releasing tons and tons of greenhouse gases, which is a self-reinforcing effect, amplifying the climate crisis. When I was reading about the climate crisis maybe 30 years ago, this was a scenario for the middle of the 21st century or even later than that. And it's happening now. Climate crisis is a hard scientific fact, and anybody who denies that is either foolish or totally ignorant. Thank God their number is decreasing rather fast. The climate crisis is an existential threat to our planet, one could say, but it's not only the planet, it's a threat to nature as we know it. There will always be nature, I'm sure, but to nature as we know it, and lastly, a danger, a threat to us humans. And while the most vulnerable countries and people are the ones to suffer first, for instance, several Pacific islands like Palau or like the Marshall Islands, all of us are affected. For instance, Austria is a country where about 60% of the surface are covered by vulnerable alpine ecosystems. Last year was the hottest year on record. The year before that was the hottest year on record, and so on, prompting many of our communities, towns and regions, that is on the subnational level, to declare a climate emergency. And future generations will be at a loss to understand why we have not acted sooner. Frankly, I am at a loss too. Yet it is not all bleak. Science tells us that the climate crisis can still be halted if we act fast. We know what it takes. We know what there is to do. We know the cost of it. And we know, or we should know, that doing nothing and postponing all action will be the most expensive option in the medium and in the long term. This also we know for 20 years by now. So let's go on with it.
Can I ask you to
Get on.
wrap up?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh.
I have not a very nice time.
I could go on all evening about that. Okay. Will you be patient with me if I just say that next year at the latest we will have an emergency declaration for nature and people?
Ah, fabulous.
Thank you very
More
much.
than patient. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I've been told that, Your Serene Highness, you must leave. And it's been a pleasure having you with us. And we look forward to working with you on this very important emergency declaration and the plan of action. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. Again, as I said, I was given a poisoned chalice here, having to interrupt all of these unbelievably distinguished representatives and heads of state. It's not very easy. But I would like to turn to His Excellency from the Seychelles, because we have spoken now, and you can stay there or you can come up, whatever you prefer. But I think it's important that we speak a little bit about island states and some of the issues that you're confronted with.
Very good. Very good. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start with a well-known proverb. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. Another important observation is that we are the first generation to fully understand our devastating impact on the planet, and the last generation that can do something about it. In other words, we have the responsibility, the means, and the power to choose the planet Earth we will leave our children. I agreed to take part in this event in support of an emergency declaration for nature and people in 2020 because I firmly believe the environment needs to be protected at all costs. We are losing forests, ecosystems, and other habitats at an alarming rate, with the greatest loss of biodiversity ever recorded in the history of humankind. Our ocean, vital to Seychelles as a large ocean state than most, is more polluted and stressed than ever, to the extent that there could be more plastic than fish by the year 2050. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is the highest it has ever been in the last 3 million years, with the 5 warmest years on record occurring in the past 5 years. And as what Hurricane Dorian did to our island brothers and sisters in the Bahamas shows, extreme events are reaching a scale where they could turn whole countries into failed states. The health of planet Earth is collapsing before our very eyes. We caused these problems and now we must solve them. We can no longer afford a fragmentary approach where the Convention on Biological Diversity, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and a future treaty on marine biodiversity in the high seas work in silos if we are to implement the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. My country, Seychelles, agrees that 2020 provides a momentous opportunity for world leaders to take a series of global decisions on nature, the ocean, and climate that will set the direction for our planet's future. I call on all leaders to rally around this cause for nature and people and believe in the power of our collective efforts to shape a future of which we can all be proud. The time to act is now. It is not the judgment of history I fear the most, but that of my children and my grandchildren. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. As you have clearly indicated, it is clear that there are already some of our island states that are suffering. And those of us who live in the European hemisphere, I'd like to now ask our new Vice President, I hope our new Vice President, because you still have to go through the final hearings, but I think we're all praying and rooting for you. Our first Vice President, Timmermans, to come up and say a few words around exactly what we're doing also in the European Union and your championship on these issues.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, now you know what's up. You've listened to the previous speakers, so we all know what's up. So what are we going to do about it? We have sort of two groups of people who actually don't want us to do too much action. One group says there's no problem. The other group says the problem's so big, it's beyond retrieve, it's beyond saving it, so let it be. To the first group, I would say, imagine you're right, and more than 90% of the scientific community in the world is wrong. Even imagine if that's true. Then wouldn't it still be a good idea to preserve nature? Wouldn't it still be a good idea to create cities where the air is clean for our children and grandchildren, Wouldn't it still be a good idea to save our forests? Wouldn't it still be a good idea to create a more healthy environment and to make sure biodiversity stays? I think it still would be a good idea. So that would be my reaction to the first group. The second group, who's actually desperate, I would say, look at what the Club of Rome has produced. Look at what all the scientific community is putting on the table. Look at what people who've thought and talked about this for more than 20 years have put forward. If we take a holistic approach, if we look at this in a way that this is the biggest systemic challenge humankind has faced in generations, and that we can tackle this because science is on our side, our children are on our side, time has come to act, and we can act. And from the perspective of the European Commission, our plan is to make sure that we will be a climate-neutral continent by 2050. Yeah. To achieve that, we'll have to make sure that by 2030 we would have reduced our emissions with 55%. To do that, we will have to start changing legislation very, very soon. So the promise I make is that within the first 100 days, after the 1st of November when the new Commission von der Leyen takes up office, we will come up with concrete plans to legiferate, to regulate, and to make sure that with your contribution, the scientific community, the wider public, everybody who has an interest in this, that we make concrete plans to reduce emissions, to speed up our transition to sustainable energy, to have a real plan on biodiversity. And here I have a concrete challenge to the scientific community. It's easy to measure CO2 emissions and to do something about reducing it. How do we measure biodiversity, and how do we come up with concrete data we can use to safeguard our biodiversity? Please give us some ideas on this. And I would also want to launch this idea that we should have a massive reforestation program also for Europe. Because if every single citizen in Europe, whether they're in the European Union or close to the European Union, knows that they can have a concrete contribution to creating clean air in our cities simply by planting trees, they will feel very much attached to this. And I say this with a very important experience I had in the last 3 years. When I started talking in the Commission 3 years ago about a plan to tackle single-use plastics, I was ridiculed. You said you would make the Commission big on big things, and now you're talking about straws. But what happened in the meanwhile, that thanks to people like Richard Attenborough, thanks to Sky News, and thanks to, I have to say this here, the tabloids, there was a huge public awareness that we have a problem, that our oceans are suffocating, that we will have more plastics in the seas than fish by 2050 if we don't act. And it's the public who forced us to act. And I believe that if we create the same sense of urgency on clean air in our cities, on biodiversity, on saving our forests, on making this transition to sustainable energy, we will get the same support to do what is necessary. Thank you very much.
So if anyone thought that this was going to be another one of those boring, mundane cocktails at the UN, think again. We've got some impassioned pleas here, and I think it's very important that we support also this leadership that we're hearing from in ensuring that we give them the support that they need in order to have the right solutions, hence why we've been talking about a real plan of action. May I ask His Excellency from Bhutan to come. I think many of you, and I'm so proud to have you here myself as well. The Club of Rome has been talking about beyond GDP and thinking about new indicators to growth for 50 years. And Bhutan has been really showing the leadership on how we can look at different types of indicators for the well-being of people. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure many of you must be wondering, why am I here today? A small mountainous country, underdeveloped, poor, yet why am I in between these developed countries' leaders? Is it the miniskirt that I'm wearing or something else? But one thing I'm very sure is if you had a spirometer here, if you measure our lung volumes and tidal volume, I'm sure I can beat every one of you. Because I come from a land that is carbon negative. Today, when you are trying to fight to be carbon neutral, we are carbon negative. We are carbon negative because at least 60% of our country has to be under forest cover by the mandate of our constitution. And right now, we have 72%. And many of, thank you. And many of that forest that we have, 72% of the country, is either legally national parks, biological corridors, wildlife sanctuaries, so that there will be forests for generations to come. And when it comes to natural resources, we cannot do what we want to do. Natural resources, our constitution clearly says that we have to maintain intergenerational equity, so that this generation will tap resources for a little while and then leave the rest for the next generation. All these are because of a far-sighted leadership of our kings. 4 or 5 decades back, when nations around the world started embarking on GDP and targeting rapid economic development, Bhutan actually embarked on a little different path. That path, I would call it, with pride, gross national happiness path. We do not measure our growth, economic growth, in terms of monetary values. We measure in terms of how happy, how peaceful you are, how content you are. With this, I would like to mention, as a very passionate, actively operating surgeon, let me draw your attention to an analogy here. When it comes to climate change, I can directly apply it to my surgical practice. We see a lot of patients. We tell them what to do, what not to do, what to eat, what not to eat. Some listen, many of them do not listen to us. Those who don't listen come back after a few years with incurable disease, stage 4 cancers. By then it's too late. Same on climate change. The science is out there. Evidence is loud and clear. I personally feel that we all must sit down and listen to the scientists, go by the scientific data. Otherwise, we'll have an incurable, diseased earth. That's why gross national happiness values, our king defines it, gross national happiness is a developmental philosophy, development with values. Values that will keep us grounded on our traditional norms, values that will help us love this Mother Nature. I'm trying to initiate a movement in our schools back home to teach them right from the schools, inculcate them in our curriculum, the facts about climate change, so that they grow up knowing the consequences of the air that they breathe in, consequences of the water that they drink, the consequences of the environment that they live in. So with this, I would like to sincerely request all the leaders, like-minded people who are gathered here today, to not let this world go on to get a disease that is incurable. So rightly mentioned, it is really a surgeon speaking. It is really an emergency declaration that we all must unconditionally support this Nature and People 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your passion and also your leadership in Bhutan to show that things can be done very differently. And still, you have a very happy and healthy population that is learning daily from the educational system as well. I would like to turn to the country that actually continuously is at the top of the happiness index. And it's not because of the weather, as we all know, but it is very much because of some of these very important indicators. And one of the books that actually the Club of Rome published is The Nordic Secret, and I would urge you all to read it, which talks about why the Scandinavian countries have been able to thrive, but also how they've been able to create an egalitarian, fairly equal wealth distribution and continue to be a very happy population when actually they do not see the sun for about 6 months out of the year. I know, and you know that I love Norway. Please, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. I've also been philosophing a lot about why we were on the top of those lists of happiness for some years. And because if you're a politician, you don't really feel the happiness of your people. You feel the complaints of the people. But I thought that maybe the easy access to complaining about politicians leave you more happy. So maybe that's part of it also. But this is not the issue here. The issue here is the acceleration loss of nature. I think it's a big threat to humankind. So is also climate change. And the science is clear that business as usual is not an alternative. We need to take care of our forests and our oceans. We have to stop biodiversity loss, and we have to cut emissions, and we must get ourselves on track to reach the SDGs. We can only succeed doing this through international cooperation. We need a strong agreement for nature. Norway is committed to doing what it can to make the Biodiversity Conference in China next year a success. The initiative for an emergency declarance for nature and people in 2020 could mobilize actions for a more ambitious outcome. And I invite you to join me in supporting this initiative. Protecting nature is also about protecting our economy. Not so many puts this into emphasis, but it does really count. The oceans provides food and jobs, but they face serious threats. Protection must go hand in hand with sustainable use. This morning, the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy called for urgent climate-based ocean action. And at our ocean conference in Oslo next month, we will forge new partnerships and build momentum. So our oceans are important, but our rainforests are as equally important, and they are under serious threat. These unique ecosystems have a vital role to play in mitigating climate change and maintaining global biodiversity. They also are important sources for food, for medicine, for livelihoods, and we see tropical deforestation continues at an alarming rate. So we must do more to protect our forests. And we know that agriculture is a major drive of deforestation and biodiversity loss. But however, the recent report for the Food and Land Use Coalition shows that it's possible to feed a growing population in a way that helps mitigate climate change and safeguard biodiversity. Norway will continue to support the tropical forest countries that are committed to significantly reducing forest loss in a period up to 2030. We have done that the last 10 years, and we will continue to do it because we believe that this is extremely important. And I'm happy to see that one of the good parts of what happens this summer with the burning in the Amazon is that more countries are now seeing that we need to build a global alliance to protect the forests. Up until now, it's been Norway, Germany, and UK who has been the sponsors of trying to do something. And we need competition. I always say competition is good. We need more countries to really work on this. So we attach great importance on strong partnership and alliance, and we greatly appreciate the tropical forest countries that are leading the way, because they are doing a lot themselves. For example, Gabon is showing strong political will to protect its forests. And I'm pleased that we are entering into a result-based agreement with Gabon through their Central African Forest Initiative. Indonesia has also succeeded in reducing deforestation in the last few years. President Jokowi's reforms are producing results. And we are about to make our first payment under our result-based partnerships. We all have a responsibility to take action, and our leadership will be crucial. So, in the future, I think all of us have more to do, and we have to make sure that international corporations are among the most important things to work on. Let me just end by saying something about the oceans, because the way we manage the oceans in the future is going to be extremely important for biodiversity. In fact, we are on the possibility of losing species we never heard about these days, because there's so much we don't know about the oceans. But we are depleting the oceans because we are not cooperating well enough internationally, because we allow illegal and unregulated fisheries, and because this vast part of the oceans in this world is not controlled by a national state. So we have to do more, and we have to put this higher on the agenda for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you to all give a final applause for this very esteemed panel? And ask you to all step down. Thank you very much for your commitment and for being here with us today. We've now been joined by His Excellency Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And it's a real pleasure for me to introduce you, Prime Minister. You may not know that I actually worked with your father as a stagiaire in the European Commission. Amazing how time flies. And we saw each other in many events in Brussels at the time. What's important here is that nature and our declaration today to preserve nature and to bring people at the core of nature crosses all political spectrums. And I think it's important to have the Prime Minister here to introduce a very important friend of ours, David Attenborough, who will be giving us a very important message. Thank you and welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Well, listen, I'm just a warm-up act for Sir David Attenborough, so I don't want to keep you very long, particularly since I know that it's been a long day, and you all want to go out, I imagine, to refreshment and round off your evening. But this is a very, very important issue that we all face. It's scarcely possible to think of a more important issue. I don't think our kids, the younger generation, have any idea of the horror, the pace at which this loss is taking place and the catastrophe that we're seeing. We've got about 1 million species staring down the barrel of extinction after losing 500 species in the course of the last century. Elephants alone declining at the rate of about 8% a year. And it's hard to express what we are doing to the natural world, but let me try. Imagine that your arms are a pair of scales, and imagine that a couple of hundred years ago, the biomass of the animal kingdom would have greatly outweighed humanity, even 100 years ago. Greatly outweighed humanity. But today, such has been the prodigious growth in the human race, not just in our own individual avoirdupois, but in the number of human beings, and such has been the catastrophic fall in the number of other vertebrates, and indeed all species, that the human beings on this planet now outweigh every other vertebrate by 9 times. 9 times. And I think overall, human beings outweigh the rest of the natural biomass by about 3 to 1. A quite incredible transformation in what is happening in our world. And let me put it another way. There are more UN officials than there are lions in the wild in Africa. There are more EU officials. There's a very good EU official who spoke just now. Wonderful. I think he was absolutely right in everything he said. But there are more EU officials than there are tigers. Far more. In fact, there are more members of the House of Lords in the United Kingdom than there are Siberian tigers. What is the answer? What is the answer? Obviously, it occurs to me to feed the House of Lords to the tigers. There are some species that might be the most environmentally friendly thing to do. But we need to reverse this. We need to reverse this disaster, and the UK is utterly determined to do it. And next year at the COP 26, and I hope to see you all there. Which we're running with my friend Giuseppe Conte of Italy. Claire Perry is going to be leading on it for us. I hope to see you there, because we'll not only be tackling climate change. I want to answer directly the challenge that was posed to us by the distinguished gentleman from the European Commission. Yes, we do need to start to quantify our objectives. and we need to evoke the spirit of Kyoto that set those targets for reductions of greenhouse gases. And we need to set quanta, we need to set targets, we need to set ambitions to reverse the loss of biodiversity, reverse the loss of species and habitats. And that is what the UK government is committing to doing. That's why I'm announcing today a biodiversity fund of 220 million to expand on the Darwin initiative, which has already helped to save the spoon-billed sandpiper and other species. We are massively expanding the Blue Belt programme, and my friend and colleague Zach Goldsmith can tell you more about what we're doing with that. We are now protecting a marine area. UK is protecting a marine area, roughly speaking, the size of India. And we are proud to say that it is going up the whole time. Don't forget that I think I'm right in saying that a third of the world's emperor penguins are British. And there is a huge diversity in those marine protected areas that we want to protect. And one target that I think we should set is that we should try to protect 30% of the world's seas by 2030. Wouldn't that be the right thing to do for our planet? Let's do that. We are putting today £100 million into a landscapes fund, which is intended to protect the environment of particularly endangered species. And one thing that we're developing is the concept of routes, elephant corridors, to allow elephants to migrate without risk to themselves across Africa. You might call them trunk routes, I suppose, if you wanted to popularize it. Those are some of the things that we want to do. But I cannot emphasize enough the horror of what is happening and the speed at which it is happening. And I hope very much that all of you will come to the COP next year in Glasgow in November. It'll be absolutely fantastic in Glasgow in November, and it will be wonderful. Please come. Please, exactly. It'll be not unlike Norway. Please come to the COP in Glasgow, because we intend to put this issue of biodiversity and reversing the loss of species and habitat at the very heart of our ambitions for humanity and for this planet. So let the message go forth from this UNGA to next year's COP that we are going to set targets for biodiversity, and we're going to mean it. Thank you all very much for listening to me this evening. And I now have great pleasure in handing over to, in televisual form,
yes,
the great pioneer of and the patron saint of all those who care about the natural world, Sir David Attenborough. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very sorry I can't be with you all today at such an important gathering. Some have speculated that I've seen more of the natural world than anyone else. Well, it's certainly true that I have been extremely fortunate to spend my life travelling the world to film and share the wonders of nature. I've witnessed the natural world at its most fascinating and vibrant. But I've also witnessed startling changes that are today threatening our very civilizations. It's worth reflecting that our civilizations arose in large part because of the last 12,000-year period of climatic stability known as the Holocene, which allowed humans to settle and farm. This stability ultimately gave rise to international trade in ideas as well as goods, making us the globally connected species we are today, and in need of the international governance that you and your institutions provide. However, we've taken that stability for granted. Our economies and political systems are unconsciously predicated on the belief that nature will continue to be a benign and regular provider of the conditions we need to thrive. Regular seasons, dependable fresh water, endless fish, pollinators, minerals, soil. It's now apparent that the Holocene has ended and our stable, reliable planet no longer exists. The impacts of this destabilization will profoundly impact every country on Earth. When you think about it, there is perhaps no more unsettling thought. The only conditions modern humans have ever known are changing and changing fast. You are all in positions where you can make more of a difference than most. If ever we needed a strong signal from world leaders, from people like you, that we're going to solve this, it is now. In 2020, we have a key moment in history. Some have called it a super year, a coming together of major global decisions on climate, nature, oceans, and development. It could not be more important and far-reaching. What we do in the next few years will determine the next few thousand years. Thank you for your leadership so far, and I wish you every success in inspiring other world leaders to join you in this vital task.
So many of us have grown up with that unbelievable voice and those incredible messages. And there are many champions who have already said that they will. May I call the next panel to join me up here in order to continue to talk about the need for leadership. I would like to ask His Excellency Prime Minister Boris Bainimarama from Fiji. I think you are here. Oh, there you go. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I apologize if I completely tortured your beautiful name. I did not mean to do that. May I also ask His Excellency President Carlos Alvarado Quesada, Republic of Costa Rica, to join us up here? I know that you're here somewhere, Your Excellency. There you are. Please, come up. And then His Excellency President Faustin Archange Touchera of Central African Republic to join us as well. Welcome. Vous parlez français?
Oui.
Parfait.
Donc,
Mais vous allez parler en français ou vous allez parler en anglais?
non, en français.
D'accord. Okay. And I think we have translation, or shall I do simultaneous translation at the same time? Wonderful. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask you, esteemed gentlemen, to continue to build on the incredible panel that we had before, the words of David Attenborough and the words of Prime Minister Boris Johnson, on your declarations with relationship of nature and people, and also your work in your countries. You can stay where you are, or you can come up to the lectern. You have a 5-minute total. Would you like to start? And would you like to stay there or come up here?
I'll come there.
Okay.
Thank you, Excellencies. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Bulavinaka, and a very good evening to you all. Your Excellencies, I don't have to tell you that the world is in the grips of climate emergency. I've seen the devastation wrought by climate impacts within my own eyes across Fiji. I hear it in the stories and experiences shared with me by our people, and I've mourned the loss of our own citizens due to this brutal phenomena. Fiji stands with the deafening calls of the youth and the delegates who spoke today to unite behind the science and recognize the scale of the threat we face. I salute both the organizers of this event and my fellow speakers for calling attention to the invaluable role that natural ecosystems play in providing us with healthy food and fresh water. Nature not only sustains us, but also offers a sustainable, essential solution to many of the most severe impacts brought on by climate change. As most of you in this room are aware, nature offers tremendous benefits to both reduce emissions and promote adaptive resilience to climate change. Healthy forests and land act as a carbon sink, thus capturing more than 20% of the emission reductions required to hit our temperature goals. Rehabilitating forests can ensure that agricultural systems remain full of the soils and nutrients required to provide food security. And it is one of the great tragedies of our age that short-term economic considerations are leading to irreparable harm to the planet at a pace and scale never before seen in human history. Scientists say we have entered an era of human-caused mass extinction. We cannot sit idly by and do nothing, as if we are powerless to act. We can act, and we must act now. This unsustainable behavior is only going to change either when we reach the point where nature no longer provides the life-sustaining services we rely upon, or when we take action and shift financial flows into activities that protect or restore nature rather than destroy it. Simply put, forests must be worth more alive and thriving than when they are indiscriminately burnt for short-term economic gain. In Fiji, as part of our own response to the climate threat, we are strengthening our own nature-based solutions. As part of our broader response, we have identified the opportunity to plant around 30 million trees in the next 10 to 15 years, and also have a plan to monetize the stored carbon in our thriving and expanding forests and mangroves. We will seek to leverage the international marketplace to provide funding for these efforts using the highest standards and practices. By selling the carbon captured in Fijian trees and mangroves into the international marketplace, the entire system will benefit from higher levels of ambition, better outcomes on the ground, and a tangible positive signal for Fiji and other countries with natural capital that their resources are precious. I'm sure this will fire the imaginations of our people and encourage them to protect our trees and mangroves, because they will not only have a natural value, but will be worth serious dollars and cents. It seems so sensible when you think about it. Nature-based solutions are cost-effective, scalable, and ready to deploy immediately. They are also politically attractive because of the benefits they offer, in addition to helping us tackle the climate emergency. So let's seize this opportunity for the benefit of all our citizens and the health of our planet and the only home we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am always amazed at the incredible work and actions that many of the island states are taking on when they are suffering from the direct effects of climate. Very much appreciate also the way in which you are seizing this also as a potential opportunity. Our hearts are with you, as well as our courage, and we will continue to support Fiji and also the island states. May I call upon now Your Excellency, President Carlos Alvarado Quesada. We all know that Costa Rica has done an amazing job in trying to also shift its economy and looking also at other indicators of growth. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Excellencies, members of the panel, distinguished guests, good evening. And for me and for my team, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I was born in 1980. I'm almost 40. And in the last 40 years, the biomass of wildlife has reduced dramatically, about 60% in the planet, in my lifetime. And picture that in the lifetime of humanity and what has happened in the last 40 years. In 2050, when my son is going to be about my age, I cannot imagine having with him this conversation. What would I say? Gabriel, there used to be something called a jaguar. Gabriel, in Costa Rica, we used to have beautiful birds called macaws. Or, Gabriel, I'm sorry, but there were lichens, and I can tell you, but I cannot show you that. But he's going to be my age. And what is he going to say to me? Luckily, there is hope, I believe. Also, when I was born in 1980, forest coverage in Costa Rica was only 20%. Now, forest coverage is 52%, if I'm not mistaken, Minister. And our commitment to 2030 is to raise that to 60%. But we also know we are lagging behind in protection of the oceans. We are only 2% now. But the funny thing is, not the funny, the marvelous thing is that in those 2%, we have seen increase of the biomass. And actually fishermen are happy beside those protected areas. So we are persuading them to increase that and also to meet that commitment of 30 by 2030. Because of those strategies, nature-based strategies, in Costa Rica, we've seen the population of jaguars increase during my lifespan. We've seen the population of macaws, or lapas, as we call them, increase in that time. We've seen the increase of the population of lagartos, crocodiles. Thank you. I have here my advisor. We've seen the increase of the population of our tapirs, or dantas. Also because with payment on environmental services, national parks, we've created biocorridors, also for the biodiversity of the different specimens to move, not to be locked geographically. So those examples said it is possible to have nature-based solutions and to make a change. It's not impossible, it's possible. But then we need to take action and we need to commit. In the pre-COP that's going to be held in Costa Rica from the 8th to the 10th of October, we will be fostering a high-ambition coalition for nature, heading then to Chile on December for the COP, and to lead and to strengthen nature-based initiatives for not only for biodiversity and nature, but also for the climate crisis we live in. And that's how we're going to contribute. And please take us into account in any of those initiatives, because here we are to take action, me for my son, but I know everybody for the planet that we love. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yet another very inspirational, motivational plea for moving forward in terms of an emergency declaration. Thank you. Monsieur le Président, voulez-vous rester à côté de votre traducteur ou voulez-vous venir ici? Comme vous voulez. Vous voulez venir? C'est ce qui est le plus facile. Sinon, je peux vous donner un micro. D'accord.
Merci. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, la République centrafricaine est heureuse de prendre part à cet événement de haut niveau qui, traitant des questions de la nature, touche directement à l'axe du sommet sur les solutions basées sur la nature retenues par la déclaration sur la position commune des pays de la CEAC.
Ladies and gentlemen, The Central African Republic is pleased to be part of this high-level event that is directly related to one of the climate action thematic, which is nature-based solution.
Je remercie donc le Fonds mondial pour la nature pour avoir invité mon pays à cette rencontre.
This is the moment for me to express my gratitude to the Worldwide Fund for Nature for inviting me to this meeting.
Mesdames et messieurs, je voudrais saisir cette occasion pour exhorter tous les pays du monde à assurer une conservation efficace et durable des ressources naturelles auxquelles les populations sont attachées, car elles contribuent réellement à leur survie.
It is essential that my country ensures an effective and sustainable natural resources management, since this really contributes to the survival of our people.
En ce qui concerne mon pays, la République centrafricaine, nous avons adhéré aux instruments juridiques internationaux qui visent à conserver le patrimoine naturel et l'utiliser de manière rationnelle pour les générations actuelles et futures.
Concerning my country, we have adhered to international legal tools related to natural heritage conservation and sustainable use of natural resources for the present and the next generation.
Il n'est pas superfétatoire de rappeler que la protection des ressources naturelles constitue aujourd'hui un défi majeur pour des pays comme le mien, qui fait face à de nombreuses pressions causées à la fois par les populations pauvres, mais vulnérables, sans alternative, ainsi que par le contexte de l'insécurité due aux conflits armés qui réduisent les efforts de l'État.
Natural resource protection is now a major challenge for a country like mine, facing many pressures from both poor and vulnerable population without alternatives, as well as the context of insecurity due to armed conflict, negatively impacting my government efforts.
En dépit de sa situation de pays post-conflit, donc fragile, la République centrafricaine, consciente de sa responsabilité dans la recherche de solutions mondiales pour faire face à l'urgence planétaire, s'est résolument engagée à assurer la préservation des écosystèmes par la prise de décisions destinées à combattre les pressions humaines pour le maintien de l'équilibre écologique, et ce, grâce aux appuis techniques et financiers du WF.
In spite of all those difficulties, my country, Central African Republic, is committed to find out solutions to fight all those challenges based on the action, decided by my government with the support of WWF.
Nous avons fait de l'environnement une des priorités nationales et pris à cet effet des mesures telles que la lutte contre les effets des changements climatiques, notamment la réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre dues à la déforestation et de la dégradation des forêts, de sa conservation et l'augmentation des stocks de carbone.
We have given to the environment thematic priority, to reduce the greenhouse gases emission and to contribute to the preservation of biodiversity.
L'adoption des plans d'aménagement forestier et faunique.
Some of the action we have conducted with the support of WWF is the elaboration of a reforestation plan and biodiversity plan.
Le projet de reboisement à utilité de bois de chauffe des populations de la zone sud-ouest de la République centrafricaine.
Reforestation project in the eastern zone of Central Republic.
La création des coordinations nationales climat, de la biodiversité et de la désertification.
Creation of the National Climate Coordination, Biodiversity and Desertification.
La création des aires protégées de Zanga-Sanga.
Creation of Zanga-Sanga Protected Area.
Les aménagements des salines dans les aires protégées qui ont permis le maintien et le retour des espèces fauniques.
Installation of salt marshes in protected area that have allowed the maintenance of return of wildlife species.
C'est ici le lieu d'exprimer ma reconnaissance à l'endroit de tous les partenaires et en particulier le WWF pour ses actions constantes d'assistance dans la préservation de la nature et les sociétés humaines.
This is the right place today for me to express my gratitude to all our partners, and especially WWF, for its regular support to the preservation of nature and human being.
Ma vision du mécanisme de réduction des émissions liées à la déforestation et à la dégradation des forêts projette la restauration de 3,5 millions d'hectares de forêts et de terres dégradées d'ici 2030.
My vision for the Red Police mechanism is to restore 3.5 million of hectares of degraded forest and lands by 2030.
Ma présence ici témoigne d'une attention particulière que mon pays accorde à la protection de la nature et des hommes.
My presence here is a way to express the special attention my country gives to the protection of nature and people.
En terminant mon propos, je voudrais affirmer que la République centrafricaine soutient sans réserve la déclaration sur la nature et les hommes pour 2020. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. I would like to come to
Wow. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Vraiment. I think what we have just heard is the amazing dedication of an African country, and there are so many others. And as we conclude this panel and move on to some of the summarizing that we will need to do, I just want to leave you with a few thoughts. First, the fact that WWF and other organizations have systematically been working in Africa and other countries to ensure that actually we can look at the convergence of these tipping points, bring forward the right help, the right assistance in terms of capital, in terms of projects, and in terms of all of the human resources that we need. That demonstrates the importance of partnership as we move into this planetary emergency that we are in now. We cannot do it alone. We must support an emergency declaration for nature and for people. We must work together in order to enable this planetary emergency plan. We've heard about the preservation of forests. We must look at the preservation of all of our global commons that are enabling us as humans to live on this planet. We must start to look at those difficult conversations. The phasing out of fossil energy, moving out of fossil by 2020, ensuring we no longer subsidize fossil. Now, we know how many economies are dependent on fossil energy. We will need to work with those economies to create a just transition, because otherwise we cannot bring human beings on the journey with us as we emerge from emergency. So thank you to the bravery of you, distinguished gentlemen, and all the other leaders that are also in this room. And may I then pass on the microphone to Pavan Sukhdev of WWF to continue and finalize. May I ask you to please step down?
Thank you.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and privilege to try and close this very rich session, for which I would like to invite Christiana Pasca-Palmer, the Secretary General of the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, and Ruth Porat, the Chief Finance Officer of Google, to join me on the stage, please. Christiana. We've heard that there is wind in our sails. We've heard the very, very inspiring statements and commitments from so many national leaders. This gives us the confidence that we can move ahead with the agendas with the world of business, with so many other nations, with indeed the world of indigenous communities and First Nations, and of course, with the people, the hundreds of millions of people whom we, WWF, have committed to inspire and mobilize to achieve the mission that we all share. With that, I invite Christiana Pasca-Palmer, the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, to try and summarize her thoughts in 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pavan. And first of all, let me congratulate WWF for this amazing event, for bringing all of you here in this room, heads of state, heads of government. It's too bad they are leaving, but I think their messages are here, and we've all been very, very inspired. As the head of the UN Biodiversity Convention, I feel the great pride to be involved in this very crossroads of history in what we need to achieve in the coming years, but also a huge responsibility because we are supporting all the member states of the convention, and that's 196 countries, the entire UN, to really march forward in bringing ambition to this agenda and, frankly, trying to take the right action that would put a stop on biodiversity. So I've been given only 3 minutes, and I want to be very practical and pragmatic about my time, and I would like to invite reflection on 3 points. 3 asks, if I may, to the heads of states and heads of governments, and really all the ministers and all the actors that need to be part of this transformative change that we need to see. You all have tremendous power, and we are here today to reflect and support an emergency declaration for nature and people. I insist on the people because in discussing with our great friends from WWF, we said if we are to move forward in this agenda, we need to make it clear for people why this is critical for them. And why it's critical for them is because it's not just about the species or the charismatic species, it's not just about conservation, it's about all of us together as one ecosystem, as one biosphere. But I think declaration, it's fantastic because it's going hopefully to mobilize tremendous action in the next year. But let me be provocative and ask us to go beyond declarations. And I'm asking the heads of state, the heads of government, to really walk the talk in addressing the root causes of biodiversity loss and of climate change. And those rely in the economic sector. I say that biodiversity loss is fundamentally an economic problem. And to find the solutions, we need to go back to the basics. I just want to give you examples from the recently launched, in fact, yesterday, Food and Land Use Coalition report, which talks about the hidden costs that we do not take into account from the fact that the food and land use systems are contributing 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions and are contributing 80% to the destruction of ecosystems and habitats. It's estimated to about $12 trillion a year, this hidden cost that we are not counting because we do not value correctly the natural capital. We put $600 billion a year in perversive incentives for agriculture and for food and land use systems. So what we must do, what the leaders must do, is really have the bold courage to address this and to really move forward and remove them. Repurpose the incentives, and let's invest in preserving the nature and the natural infrastructure rather than in activities that destroy that. So that was my first ask of you, to please address the root causes. You have the power to do it. You are there to produce new policies, and we are here to support you in that. And we have to respond also to the call of citizens, and not least the youth that, as you can hear this morning from Greta, are very, very worried. But so are we. This is not just about the youth. It's also about us here and our planet. My second ask, please help change the narrative. We've been discussing for too long biodiversity strictly from a conservation perspective, which is absolutely critical. Moving forward, we need to preserve the intact nature that we still have. But we cannot stop there. We need to look at the planet as one system, as biosphere, and address biodiversity in all its systems, especially, again, in agriculture. So changing the narrative means talking about the nature and people, talking about how biodiversity is important for all of us, and bring biodiversity at the heart of the political decision-making. It is, after all, the infrastructure that supports all of us here. All this totality of forms of life, which is what we call scientifically biological diversity, from the tiniest microbe to all high up on the ladder to us humans, the most evolved species, we all have our own critical role in this ecosystem. And as we are losing species, we are losing the capacity of the biosphere to function. So we need to help change that narrative and to recognize that the solution to the nature crisis is nature itself. And my third ask for all of you is please be champions of this change. We talk about the transformative change that we need to see in the coming decade. And as Sir David Attenborough was putting, is going to set the stage for this planet for the next millennia. We have a phenomenal year ahead of us with extraordinary opportunities to get this change right. We have to stay optimistic. The science is giving us so worrying data that there is a risk to go very depressive about it. But I think we have the tools, we have the creativity, we have the power of partnership to get this right. So being a champion of change means also, as we move towards the Biodiversity Conference of the Parties next year, in October in China. So before you go to Glasgow in November, please stop in China in October in the beautiful city of Kunming, which is the capital province of Yunnan, the most biodiversity rich province of China. And it's also called the City of the Gardens. I've been there. It's a superb city. The reason this is important is because it is in China that all the countries of the Biodiversity Convention, all 196 states, will come together to negotiate and agree, hopefully, a very ambitious new global policy that is binding for all of them after 2020. So from there, of course, we can go to Glasgow and start the implementation already and bring it together to climate change, but it is in China where all of this conversation about biodiversity is going to happen. And the fact that we have China hosting it, it's amazing. So with that, I would like to close by saying that the theme of the COP in China is ecological civilization, building a shared future for all life on Earth. I think it's possible that we and all the other animals and plants and forms of life on this planet can live and interact together. And I think the ecological civilization, the philosophy that we need to live in harmony with nature, it's also possible. But all of that will need your commitment, your actions, and your bold leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christiana, for sharing with us your passion for what is actually a fundamental challenge. And you rightly pointed out that we do need economic solutions for what is fundamentally an economic problem. So I'm delighted with that to say that given that the private sector is 2/3 of the economy around the world, and here in the US, 74%, GVA, a great representative of the private sector, Google, let me request you, Ruth, to share your thoughts.
We may be 2/3, but I promise to be very brief. I want to thank you. It is an absolute privilege to be here with all of you this evening. The goals that were articulated by the leaders here today to move the protection of our planet to a more paramount position should be one that is adhered to by every sector in private industry as well. At Google, our view is that every company has a moral obligation to act to protect and save the Earth if we have any hope for our children and for our grandchildren. Sustainability has been core to everything we've done since inception, and rising to this challenge is part of everything that we do. It's why we have been carbon neutral since 2007. It's why we've matched our energy consumption with renewable energy in 2017. It's why we did it again in 2018, and we didn't stop there. Hopefully, as some of you saw last week, we announced the largest ever corporate purchase of renewable energy. We're really excited about it. The purchase consists of 18 different contracts, different deals around the world. It totals 1.6 gigawatts of power. And to put that into perspective, what that means is that our renewable energy portfolio will soon produce more electricity than it takes to power Washington, D.C. every year. And for us, it wasn't just about that. Well, when we think about what we're doing in sustainability, it's really across all aspects of what we're doing at Google, our operations, our products, our supply chain. And what we do is seek to empower everyone with technology that enables sustainable action. Now, we know we're far from perfect, but we're very proud of the work that we're doing at Google to better deliver on our obligations to our planet and our sustainability goals. And to this end, we continue to see opportunities to broaden our impact through collaboration with policy leaders and the extraordinary work of the WWF. An important example is our work to build tools that provide visibility on environmental impact to leaders around the globe. And in our view, that is a critical first step in decreasing the impact. Let's start with the data. So for example, we are mapping the world's forests, oceans, water, and the watersheds in order to make it easier for scientists, environmentalists, policy leaders, organizations, communities to better identify trends and therefore to develop the right types of intervention and solutions. So at Google, what we're striving to do is integrate sustainability into everything we do, and we urge everyone here to ask themselves a simple question. What more can we be doing? What more can each of us do that makes a difference for our planet? And with that, I just want to thank you all for this time, this opportunity, and all that you're all doing to lead us forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And now you've reminded us that time has come for us to pull together and close the session. We've heard a lot of inspiring thought. I'd also like to acknowledge the UN Ambassador for the Ocean. And if I may just pick the ocean as the closing theme, the two-thirds of the surface, which is sadly suffering every form of damage possible, not just carbon pollution, but also plastic pollution. Look at what we've heard from, I just quote, from everyone from His Serene Highness in Monaco talking about the success of marine protected areas and the fact that fisheries are recovering, and indeed hearing that echoed from President Carlos from Costa Rica as well. Again, just his 2% of MPAs adding to protected areas. I think the fact that we have Google Maps of the oceans, the fact that we have monitoring, the fact that we have political will, the fact that we have recognition of the scientific reality that we can do something right. I think this is a great example of some of the power that we can unleash if we work together, recognize the reality that yes, we are in deep trouble, but at the same time, we have the ability, collectively, working together. And thank you, all you collaborators, for being here with us. I really do believe that we have the power in us and with this community to move this forward. Congratulations on launching what I believe is a unique declaration and one which should resonate next year and into the CBD COP as we reach China and beyond. Thank you very much for being here. Copies of our recommendations and those of the Club of Rome are lying on your desk, so do take them away, do share them widely, and let us know what you think. Thanks so much. That was great.
Thank you.